Many of you may not be aware, and by many I mean all two of the people who don't know this, that I am actually mixed race. Yes, you may have been concerned I haven't mentioned it in quite some time, but there admittedly is a reason that I tend to. The story I want to talk to you about today, for now, is Buzzfeed's safe space to talk about interracial dating. In my opinion and my experience, I think Buzzfeed is actually just showing that their audience are racists. I'm not kidding. So they wrote this article that says, "We built a safe space to talk about interracial dating in 2020. Identity politics and race dominate what we talk about on the internet. How honest can we be about interracial dating to one another? We built a bot who will listen and share other people's thoughts with their consent." I found it interesting at first, wondering what people would say about interracial dating. And lo and behold, almost all of the posts and the premise of the article itself is overtly racist. First, can I point out, why is it that when they say interracial dating, what they really mean is white people dating literally anyone else who's not white? Okay, as a mixed race person, am I allowed to be offended by that? Here's the thing. First, let me say, it was pointed out by at least one person saying, why are you acting like interracial dating is literally just white people and other people? I get it. It's America-centric. America is mostly white and been mostly white for a long time. But yes, interracial dating involves, like, I don't know, a Filipino person and, like, a Mexican person, or, like, you know, someone from South America, Native American, with, like, I don't know, a Chinese person? Like, that thing is real, too. You know, there are people who are black who then have Asian kids. Like, interracial is not just white people. So there's this weird kind of, like, inverted... I mean, I just call it white supremacy. Let me tell you this, right? And we'll read some of these and I'll explain what I mean. First, there's a reason why I bring up, you know, periodically that I'm mixed. I grew up on the south side of Chicago, which was a rather, like, mixed race area. I had friends of all different races for the most part. And there was a lot of Spanish on billboards. There was Polish. There was, I mean, Chicago was pretty segregated. So once you crossed 47th Street, that was where, you know, everyone who lived there was black. And south of that, it was kind of white, but pretty Hispanic as well, but still probably mostly white. Chicago was very segregated. But we all still, for the most part, hung out with each other. And these questions that people have and the way they view the world was never a thing. So I think what we're seeing is there are a lot of, like, suburban, urban, progressive types that grow up in, like, racial enclaves and have really racist thoughts. And they've shared them with Buzzfeed. But let me tell you, like, why I don't like what Buzzfeed does in their perspective is it's because it's this kind of, like, leftist white supremacy, right? So let me tell you a story. Maybe you've heard it before, but I went to the North Dakota Access Pipeline protests. I was out to dinner with some people, and to reiterate, again, I'm explaining left-wing white supremacy. And I was talking about, my friend was like, we should really stay here forever. And I said, I can only stay here for a couple days because I have to drive from North Carolina to California for a business meeting. And that meeting is in like a week. So I have to leave here in like 2 or 3 days. And this guy interrupts, and he's a white progressive. And he says, dude, man, you got to drop that colonial thinking, man. And I responded like, what do you mean colonial thinking? And he was like, dude, like schedules, meetings, you know, Native Americans don't have any of that. They just, like, they do the work when it needs to be done. They wake up when they wake up. And I was like, what? How is that? I was like, what do you mean by colonial thinking? Like, how does that have anything to do with colonialism? So Native Americans just, like, wake up when they need to? I don't understand what the point you're trying to make is. And he goes, the concept of, like, scheduling and, like, time, like meetings, I mean, that's all from white people. And I just stopped and I was like, wait, what? I was like, dude, Asian people understand the concept of time and knew how to schedule things. And the Mayans had a calendar that was, like, very accurate. I was like, white people didn't invent the concept of schedules or calendars and time. Like, I'm like, what are you trying to, and so he literally goes on to say, he's like, no, they really did. He explains it. And I said, listen, man, I'm starting to get like triggered, like offended. As a mixed race person with Asian heritage, you're sitting here telling me that, like, first of all, East Asian culture, which has tremendous developments outside of Europe, well before Europe even got there. I mean, gunpowder, for instance, that's the obvious one. It's like, no, you didn't invent time. You know, my ancestors back in Southeast Asia had these concepts too. White people didn't invent this stuff. And I kid you not, he says to me, Well, but it's because the white people went there and like brought these ideas, and I'm just like, I am not gonna sit here and listen to a white supremacist tell me that white people invented everything and that I should get rid of my culture because you think white people started certain core concepts like time. I know I was gonna read this article, but you got me monologuing. No, I monologue. That's what I do. But no, I mean, in all seriousness, this perspective exists where BuzzFeed literally writes an article telling people that interracial just means white people. They don't seem to understand, like, dude, you have this weird kind of white supremacy. Now, I understand, right? The legit definition of white supremacy is this belief that you as a white person, you think you're superior to other people. You're supreme, right? But there's a different kind of weird cultural white supremacy that exists on the left that I guess other people have called it white supremacists with a guilty conscience, is how they refer to the left. They're people who literally believe Europe invented the concept of time. Okay, sure, maybe there was like a specific scientist who like wrote down time, and like Albert Einstein was like space-time, and you can credit it that way. But like scheduling meetings is what the core argument was. I'm like, dude, people understood like the cycles of the moon, and they understood like the stars going back to like well before the colonial era and colonial Europe. It's just insane to me that you have these conversations, and it's rooted in stuff like this. So let me show you this. They say this, right? Hello there. I'm a confession bot. I've been programmed to hold space for you to process some of the difficult things you might not want to say about love and race. In recent years, online spaces and popular culture have pushed us to more complex understandings of race in the context of love and desirability. We've started discussing how Asian men are as sexy as their non-Asian counterparts. Why would you need to? I guess progressives have a white supremacy problem. We talked about the importance of black love as a radical act of resistance. I personally find that racist because I think, as somebody who grew up in a family that was mixed, these things shouldn't be a factor in who you love. It's mind-blowing to me, but yes, this is literally the narratives they push. We looked at the way Pose has confronted how gender, race, and class play into whom we love through compelling three-dimensional trans and queer characters of color. The emphasis on race and identity and gender and all this stuff is this weird kind of segregationist mentality of how our experiences are only specific to us based on our race, and like we don't share anything. And many of these people who commented, this is the point I want to get to, talk about how they'll never understand. They're white supremacists with a guilty conscience saying, I could never understand the plight of the Asian man. And to me, that's just insane. Maybe it's because I come from a mixed family and I just can't understand the concept of you literally thinking you're not the same as another person. To me, that's mind-blowing. When you have these white progressives being like, you know, you're an Asian person, I'll never understand you. What are you talking about, man? Like, I grew up in the same place as you. I grew up in Chicago. I went to baseball games and ate pizza. I think we get it. But I understand that there are differences based on race. I understand racism exists. But this idea that you can't understand another person, to me, is shocking and dangerous. There's that famous Huffington Post clip where the Asian woman tells the white host, like, you won't understand and your opinion doesn't count because you're a white guy. And he's like, I think you're stupid. And he hangs up on her or something like that. It's an old clip from HuffPost Live. But this is the kind of mentality that's pervasive to the progressive left that doesn't exist, in, at least in my opinion, in regular communities. And here's what happens when I tell these people this. They say, oh, but you're passing. Dude, don't tell me that. You don't know my experience. They simultaneously say, I will never understand your experience. And then they try and tell me they do when I try and push back saying, you're nuts. Okay, so maybe they won't. Maybe it's true. Maybe that's the proof. They'll never understand my experience when they claim that they do and then don't. It makes no sense. Okay, how are you going to say that, you know, like they do this chatbot thing where people of color dating white partners. I love how that's the default. Great, congratulations. So, you know, there's actually people here who are talking about how they're Filipino and they're dating a Mexican person, right? Yeah, but BuzzFeed says it's about white people and dating other people because these progressives view themselves as default. That's seriously how they see themselves. So for me, coming from a place where it was a bunch of mixed race people, there was no default. We were Americans. And for me and my family, it was mixed. It doesn't exist. So the reason I point this out, why a lot of people jokingly, it's not so much, the new meme about me is that I say it's complicated too much. The mixed race thing has kind of gone away. It comes and goes in waves. But I point it out because these leftists will say things like, you know, let me do this, watch. Let me search for never understand and see if it, okay. So here we go. They said, mostly I have never had to put my foot down on this issue because I'm white and I'll never understand what he's feeling. Okay, let's start with that premise, Buzzfeed. If that's the case, then I don't want to hear you ever tell me I'm passing and I won't understand because you don't understand. You see how the paradox works? When it benefits their politics, they will claim that, oh, you poor minority. And when it doesn't benefit their politics, they say, oh, well, you're passing and you'll never understand. Look, I get it. Sometimes to some people, they think I'm white. I hear it all the time. Mostly, people think I'm Hispanic. Particularly depends on how much tan I get, and it depends on what my facial hair ends up growing out to, and I shave it because I have a particularly Asian facial hair, okay? In the summer, when I would go skating and I tan instantly, I don't get sunburned, and my skin, is brown, yes, everyone calls me Mexican. So, facial features, whatever, and I've had white supremacists tell me that I look ridiculous. I personally find it funny. If you want to make fun of me and tell me I'm ugly and all that, I'm fine with that. You can insult me all day and night. I got crooked teeth, too. You want to joke about it? Go for it. But what I don't like is the exploitation of political issues for this reason, where they pretend whichever side it wants to go. If it's for them, they'll say, if you bend the knee to them, they say, you're right, whatever you say. And if you reject their premise that interracial dating is about white people dating other people instead of literally other races dating other races, well, now all of a sudden you're right wing, you're a white supremacist or whatever. This is the problem I have with these people because to me, they are a form of left-wing white supremacist. I know what the definition is, but if you literally think interracial dating is the default of white people and anyone else, then you believe white people are somehow default. That is racist. That's what I can't stand about this, because if you really want to have this great cosmopolitan society, you can't be segregating people based on these issues. So I know I didn't read this because I'm frustrated today for a lot of reasons, but you go through all these things, and it's basically people espousing this weird, it's kind of sad to me. This narrative they have about how they feel about interracial dating that's built upon intersectionality and this weird left-wing type of white supremacy. And it's sad because my family we never talked about it. It's not there was never an issue of do you question your father or your mother? And never came up. So I feel like these people who should be having just normal love are being manipulated into believing insane things by insane people for insane reasons. So I'll leave it there, but I will wrap it up with one more point. This is going to be for the podcast, but you'll hear it now in this segment. My main channel, YouTube, YouTube's got the ban hammer ready. I'm not exaggerating when I say this. I did a segment talking about Trump. I got warned, in no uncertain terms, that basically the video would be suppressed and essentially shadow banned. So it's going to be going up at 6:30 because it's over 20 minutes long. For those listening on the podcast, you're going to hear the actual segment first. And then later, you're going to hear, and after that on the podcast, you're going to hear the segment talking about Maxine Waters and Democrats, where I explain what happened. So I'm just mentioning this because the order, I'm trying to keep the order fluid now. I'm sorry, not fluid, but static, so that the order in which I produce videos will appear in the podcast. So I'm going to be changing things, doing a new show. But I'll tell you this, man, I am not exaggerating when I say that this is probably the end of political YouTube. That's it. Stick around. I got 2 more segments. The next segment will be something silly, and then we're going to talk about the Trump video that was essentially censored. So I'll see you there.